We the underdogs, underestimated, yeah. Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated, we the underdogs,
It's the Underdogs back with you for another week as we close out February, and you know what comes after that, right, Peter Keating?
Springtime, showers, flowers, and March Madness. It's the best time of year.
And it's our time of the year. I am Jordan Brenner. That's Peter Keating. And joining us is a very special guest, Mr. Jay Bilas from ESPN. Jay, how are you?
I'm doing great, gentlemen. How are you doing?
We're good. And
good.
Peter, this is the part where I'm going to say uncomfortably nice things about Jay. So, first of all, going back to our 20 years of giant killing, I think one of my favorite things was the Bilas audit of our work.
I was just reminding Jay, I don't even know if Jay remembers that he did that, but I was reminding him how generous and nice that was right just before you came on Mike, Jordan. Yeah, the Bilas audit of the Giant Killers picks.
But I'm going to say it's even more generous and nice. And I'm going to tell this story really quick, just so people out there understand the person that Jay is. Okay, forget about the kind of teammate he was when we were working with him. About 5 years ago, when COVID started, kids were home. We weren't doing anything. I was bored out of my mind. I said, let's come up with a show for kids who are stuck at home on sports. And so my son at the time was 9. We created this little show we did. And I sent out a couple of messages to people I knew in the sports world, and Jay could not have responded quicker and agreed to come on with me and a 9-year-old. Was amazing. And my son, who's now 14, will still see Jay doing a game like, oh, that's my friend. So, Jay, that's the impact you had on my son. Thank you.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to a 9-year-old more than you, but that was a lot of fun.
Well, that's great, Jay, because you get to talk with me today too, and that's about the same level. That's actually insulting to Jordan's great son, Eli. Eli could come on anytime and do a better job on this show.
All right, let's jump in here. We, as you know, sort of our niche is underdogs and giant killers and the bracket breakers. Let's start with the top of the field, okay? First things first, do you agree with the sense that there's sort of like a 6-pack of teams at the top and then a bit of a break?
Yes. I think there were probably, I had it a couple weeks ago at 8 teams that I thought could win it, possibly. And I maybe was being generous there, but it's, as you guys know, it's a lot different to get to a Final Four than it is to win a championship. So something could happen in your region. The 1 seed falls down, 2 seed falls down, something like that, and you can get to a Final Four. But winning it is a lot different because not all the big shots are going to fall down. And so once you get to the Final Four, you better be legit. And not to say the Final Four teams aren't legit, but if you look back over the last 10 years, 36 of the 40 Final Four teams are Power 5 teams. So strength matters and having pros matter.
So I'm actually curious who your 7 and 8 are. We'll get to that in a little bit. But of the 6 that we identified, so the 4 SEC teams, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, and then Houston and Duke. Is there even a class? Are Auburn and Duke maybe a class above the other 4? Do you see any division within that group?
No, I mean, I like Auburn as the best team right now, although Duke is continuing to ascend as long as they stay healthy. The problem is Duke has not played a killer schedule outside of their non-conference schedule, and it's not their fault, but it's not Auburn's fault that they've got an unbelievable schedule. I mean, their entire schedule is a quad 1 fest. So they've played tougher competition throughout. But Duke is uber talented, and I'm not sure. Maybe it'll be better that they're not getting beaten up like SEC teams are. I think there's something to be said for some of the SEC teams. Like if you lose in the quarterfinals or semifinals of the SEC tournament, you get to go home for a little while. You're off the radar and get to work on things. I mean, people forget when North Carolina won the title in 2005, they lost in the ACC semis. And I was sitting right near the North Carolina bench as the clock was running out against Georgia Tech in the semifinal game. And Roy Williams turned to the guys on the bench and said, if you guys listen to me, we're going to win the national championship. And I remember that very distinctly, like thinking these guys get to go home with a little bit of an edge and nobody's going to be thinking about them. And they ripped through the NCAA tournament and won the whole thing. So I think some of the teams that wind up losing in their tournament, I don't think winning your conference tournament it's an awesome experience, but I'm not sure that necessarily leads to NCAA tournament success, or it certainly doesn't guarantee it. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure honestly it leads to it.
Jay, I've heard you talk about how hard Houston plays. Looking at these top 6 teams, I keep thinking to myself, why not Houston? They're shooting 40% on threes, which is a big improvement from the one area that maybe they weren't really dominant in last year. And is playing hard actually a strategy? Like it doesn't sound like a very analytical thing to say, but it seems that carries over year to year for them. And how far you think? I mean, why not Houston?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, they can certainly beat anybody. They would have been in the Final Four last year had Jamal Shed not been injured in the first half against Duke. I just don't see a way that Duke would have won that game, nor do I see a way that NC State would have beaten them. And that's happened with, they've been knocking on the door for a long time now. They got to the Final Four in 21 when Baylor won it, and Baylor's just better. But Houston, to your point, they shoot it better this year. LJ Cryer, I mean, I was there on Saturday when he put 28 on Iowa State, and Iowa State was playing shorthanded, but heck, their offense was basically give the ball to LJ and get out of the way. And he was fantastic. But Emmanuel Sharp is a dead-eye shooter. Terrence Arsenault could shoot it. They got guys that could stretch you a little bit this year, which they haven't had in the past, at least to this level. So that gives them, I think, a little added punch, because you're not going to pitch shutouts in the NCAA tournament. You're going to have to score, and they could score this year, and they still defend and rebound. But your point about playing hard, that is a skill, and playing as hard as they do and as physical as they play, it can make up for mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes defensively. Not everybody's going to be in perfect position all the time, but they make up for their mistakes because they never give up on a play. They run you off the line. I mean, you think you have an open three, and then you got some 6'8" guy with a 7'6" wingspan flying at you like his hair's on fire. It wears you down after a while, and they've won a lot of games, I think, because of that.
Peter and I often talk about something we call the chameleon effect, where you can change your stripes as game situations warrant. So to your point, Houston's shooting 40% from three this year. That's third in the country. They don't take a lot of threes. They're just, I think they're 298th in the country in threes per field goal attempt. You can say, well, the high percentage is a result of taking good threes and not too many, but it also gives you the say, okay, if we're down, we need to change our strategy. We have a really good 3-point shooting team. It keeps you in the hunt. Do you look at that as like an added weapon in their arsenal that, if they have to ramp up the frequency, they can because they shoot it so well?
Yeah, I just think the ability to score and to score efficiently is really important. And Houston's got, this is their most efficient offensive team they've had in the last 25 years. And that's an important factor. I actually talked to Kelvin Sampson about this on Friday. I think he was saying, look, everybody says defense wins championships, and I get it, but he said if you can't score, it doesn't matter.
You got to be able to score,
and they can score. And that's why, like we had a big long discussion about Alabama had lost 2 games in a row or something. We had this big long discussion about, well, what's wrong with Alabama? I'm like, they play in the SEC, they're going to lose a couple games. I mean, it's a speed bump. And then the last 2, they've been fantastic. I mean, Mark Sears goes, or his last 3 now, he's went 35, 30, and 21. And they blew the doors off a good defensive team in Mississippi State last night. I don't know how many threes they hit, but it seemed like it was 17 or 18, maybe it's over 20. They had 11 in the first half. The game was over at halftime. But they're dangerous because they can score. They don't defend as well, but their pace is going to wear teams down. And look, if they shoot it like they did against Auburn in the first meeting of those 2, yeah, there are a bunch of teams that can beat them. They shot it really poorly. But when they shoot it reasonably well, they're going to put up 90-some points. I mean, they shot it horribly against Auburn, scored 85. And I can't imagine that's not a fun way for those guys to play. It's like a boulevard of green lights.
I want to swing it back to Duke for a second because, of course, I do. But let me add the caveat at the beginning that we got to wait and see what's up with Tyrese Proctor's knee, because that's a potential game changer. But I do wonder, the one thing, they've played so few close games and they had some execution problems early in the season. I'm wondering, how do you simulate not having those one possession games late to prepare your team for March? And B, Is Cooper Flagg just such a savant that he can figure this out? My favorite stat with him, 10 games in, the critique was he couldn't shoot well. He was 8 for 36 from three after his first 10 games. Since then, those next 18 games, he's 31 for 68 from three. That's 46%. I've never seen a guy who just keeps improving every time I see him. So can that impact their late game ability? And if not, what do you do about a team that just keeps blowing everybody out?
There's not much you can do. They run game situations in practice like most really good teams do. That's not the same as doing it in a game, but they have had late game situations, Clemson, Kansas, Kentucky, in games they lost. And with that in the back of your mind, I mean, I think it does sharpen your focus a little bit. And they watch film of it, and they're smart. They watch film of other teams. And look, here's a game situation we need to be mindful of, things like that. John Shire and his staff are really smart with how they teach these guys. So, you could make the argument both ways. I mean, I remember being an assistant at Duke when we played UNLV, and Coach K told the team, like, if we're in this late in the game, we live in close games and they don't. We'll know how to conduct ourselves, and they won't. And it was, I don't know that it was necessarily true, but it was something that gave, I think, our guys confidence of saying, hey, man, if we're there, we're better prepared to win. I mean, that's a confidence giving thing. So, look, their youth is a factor. There's no question that I don't care how good people are, this is the first time they've done it. And they're uber talented. But having it be the first time, there are things that can happen in those games that you haven't encountered before, and so it's always nice to have experience. But the truth is, teams with experience lose a lot in the tournament too. We've seen a lot of young teams that have done extraordinarily well in that tournament, but there are more older teams. So of course, it's going to seem like older teams do better. But the one thing I know is half the teams that play in the first round are going to lose. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you?
I'll tell you this, Jordan. Having a great record in blowouts is a good problem to have.
Yeah. All right. Well, another good problem to have is that we have too much to say, but we're going to take a break right here and come back, talk about national championship contenders outside the top six, underdogs, wounded assassins. We'll be back with Jay in a minute. We're back with Jay Bilas, and let's dive right back into it.
Jay, outside that top group of teams, who do you see as viable national contenders? Who could pull some surprises into the national championship?
I think Iowa State, healthy, can do it. They've had Curtis Jones, their leading scorer, comes off the bench, and then Keyshawn Gilbert have been injured and ill of late. But if they're healthy, they're legit. They're a lot like Houston. They're much better offensively than they've been in the last few years, and they're still really, really good on the defensive end. I tend to think that Texas Tech, I would even say Arizona and maybe Missouri have outside shots because they're all talented. They all play differently, but they have good opportunities to reach a Final Four. And if you can reach a Final Four at their level, I think you can accomplish something when you're there. But I would still favor the top 5 or 6 that we talked about at first. Now we're starting to get into the maybe range, in my view. And look, it doesn't take away. You get hot at the right time, something can happen. Like I would put Michigan State in there, except they don't shoot it, and it's really confounding because I think I expected them to be a good shooting team. They've always been, but the one good part about that is I think it's sharpened their focus of getting to the foul line. They drive it more. And they're shooting more free throws this year than any time I can remember. I haven't done the math on it and gone back and looked, but I would venture to guess that their free throw rate is higher than it's been in the last 15 years.
I was going to ask about Michigan State and whether a team that shoots under 30% from three can win it, because they are 22-5, and this is a team that in recent years has tripped up more than that in the regular season. It's like a reverse Michigan State. Let me ask you one other team that was expected to be very good that the predictive rankings still say is excellent. Gonzaga is number 9 in KenPom, and they're getting a 9 seed in bracketology. There's a real disconnect there between what the analytics say this team's ceiling is and how they're actually playing. Can they get it together for a deep run?
Yeah, I mean they're another, I think, Sweet 16 team. The problem, if you want to call it a problem, is I don't think they're as high level a defensive team as their Final Four teams have been in the past. They don't have the same rim protection. They're not as gritty defensively as they've been with some of their past truly great teams. But that shows sort of the power of that program as a team that's won 20. They'll wind up winning 26 or 27 games. We're going to go, that's not a vintage Gonzaga team. That's pretty impressive when you look at it from that perspective. But one of the problems they've had, they played, as always, a really tough non-conference schedule. They lost a couple. They gave one away to Kentucky. But in their conference, they got clipped a couple times. But I think they lost to Santa Clara. I can't remember who else. But, they got St. Mary's. This is the best St. Mary's team I've seen in a long time. St. Mary's is legit. And, they play such a difficult style because they're ultra physical and they can really slow the game down. And they've got good skill. They rebound it. But, it's like a physical beating you take against them. And their size, I think, can match up with a lot of Power 5 teams. And I think they're going to cause a real problem. I would not be surprised to see them in the second weekend.
Let's dive into mid-majors, our world, for a second. First, I got to ask you, have you been able to see Drake at all this year?
Yeah.
We love them. We love everything they do. Force turnovers. They rebound at both ends. They play slow. And obviously, they've got a winning pedigree with Ben McCollum coming from D2 and bring a bunch of those players who had a winning pedigree there. Have you seen this team play? And is this a team that can do some damage in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think, they're going to be a tough out in the tournament. I don't favor them to make this kind of crazy deep run, but that's true of a number of the mid-major teams. It's always kind of a surprise, like when Loyola did it a few years ago. I thought Loyola was really good. They could win a game or two, but didn't see them get into a Final Four. Stuff like that. Are they that kind of team? I don't know. We'll see. But the Sturts kid's really good. They got a good team. Akron's really good, but they're small. There are a bunch of really capable teams out there. But really, what the test is I think you have to be able to not only. I think you think of mid majors as you got to be able to make threes and shoot the ball and all that stuff and spread it. But I think if you look at the mid-major teams that have done really well in the tournament, they have to be able to score and guard in the post. You go all the way back to George Mason, when they had Jai Lewis and Will Thomas, like they could score and guard in the post. If you don't have that, you're going to get beat because these teams are big and can pound the glass and all. It's really tough. Like the one thing that I think is really interesting in first round matchups, and honestly, I don't know how to gauge this, is going to be officiating. The Power 5 conferences right now, not all of them, but most of them are clutch and grab leagues right now. So you try to run offense, you got a great shooter, forget it. Like that guy's getting grabbed off every screen, kind of bear hug grabs that aren't getting called. And we can sit and moan about it, but that's the way it is. Everybody's trying to deal with it. You get in the tournament and you do that, you're going to be going with officials that don't see that all the time, or at least one of them. And they start blowing that whistle, and then all of a sudden you have to adjust in a game. That can be the type of thing that leads to a Yale over Auburn type situation. And it's not that you think that Yale all of a sudden can win the national championship. It's just that's a big shot that could win it going out early as a result of having to adjust to the different style of officiating that you can see early. You won't see it later because the officials are culled down, and you're going to have mostly kind of the big shot conference officials that are going to make it down the line. So, but in the first round, you're going to see a lot of different officials that you haven't seen before, and they haven't seen the way you do it, and that could be a factor.
Jay, we love to look at power conference teams that have taken a bunch of losses. Maybe they end up in double-digit losses. Maybe they've had injuries or bad luck. So at the time of the tournament, they don't look season-wide as much of a threat as they're going to be. We call these teams kind of tongue-in-cheek as wounded assassins. Do you think there's any power conference teams that are looking down right now or won't look as good at committee time as they might be at that moment?
And we have these teams every year, by the way, whether it was NC State last
NC
year,
State is a
Syracuse
great
a couple
example.
times as an 11. They're tough to see coming, but there's always somebody.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas might be a team. I think Kansas
Hmm.
is better than they've played. They have better personnel. I could see them kind of putting it together a little bit. Another team that I think fell kind of on some, I don't know if you call it hard times or what, but I think Marquette is better than their record. You know, they've lost 6 or 7 games, and you know they've had some injuries, but a couple of the injuries guys aren't going to come back. But I think they're better than their numbers suggest. And when they get in the tournament, I think they're going to be really difficult to deal with. And I actually think Oregon's pretty good out of the Big Ten. And you know, Dana Altman's always really good in the tournament. Yeah, there are a bunch of teams that could make a run because they have personnel and maybe haven't lived up to it through the course of the year. Clemson's another team I think is undervalued. I think Clemson's could wind up as a second weekend team. I don't see some of these teams we're talking about as being a title threat, but you know, we've been surprised before. But it's been a long time since we've been surprised, like ultra surprised by a title. We're getting surprised by Final Fours lately. We're not getting that surprised by titles, and you know, like a Villanova thing or NC State in '83. We're not seeing that as often these days.
Right. People forget that you still got to win 2 more games after you make it to the Final Four, and that's hard. But Jay, look, we really could go on forever with you, and so what we're proud of ourselves about is that we did not delve into any off-court stuff
Right.
during this 25 minutes. So we are officially inviting you back this summer when we have no games to discuss, and then we can talk about the state of the game. I know you love that. We love that. So open invitation when you're not on the golf course.
I'm in. So thank you for inviting me. I'll be there.
All right. Well, enjoy the
Thank
best
you.
month of the year. We will be watching you the next couple of weeks, and you know, can't wait to enjoy it with you.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right, Peter, before we go, it's time for our underdog of the week, brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. And Peter, we've been banging this drum for 2 years, so it's time to hit it even harder for the 3rd year. The Cincinnati Reds are coming, and they have the 4th best odds to win the NL Central. They're plus 650.
That makes no sense.
That's
That makes no
worse
sense.
than the Cardinals and barely better than the Pirates. Peter, let's hammer it. Let's go. Reds plus 650 to win the NL Central.
Reds were unlucky last year. Should have won more than 80 games. They won 77. And if you construct it however you want, Jordan. Pick your way of building the machine. Pick a breakout candidate to an MVP. Ellie De La Cruz is on that list. The man's 24 years old, an emerging superstar.
They've got tons of young talent across the diamond. Spencer Steer, Matt McClain. They got Gavin Lux from the Dodgers. TJ Friedel, Jake Fraley. Austin Hayes has been elevating the ball in spring training and sitting there waiting to eventually come to fruition. Noelvi Marte is still in the system. Rhett Lauder is going to come up and pitch. Hunter Green is ready to be an ace. There's a lot of talent there.
Isn't Christian Encarnacion Strand still kicking around? There's so much talent. We forget about the second-level talent, which used to be first-level talent prospects.
Right. And I know you liked when they signed Nick Martinez last year as an innings eater. They got Brady Singer to strengthen the rotation in the Jonathan India trade. This team's got a lot going for it, Peter.
You know what? You know what Rhett Lauder
said.
said. You know what Rhett Lauder says about this team being such a big underdog. Frankly, he doesn't give a damn.
Oh my goodness. Well, on that note, I'm Jordan. That's Peter. Go Reds for the 3rd straight year, and we'll be back next week.